Hi, everybody. In today's session of the Legend Life Summit, I have the pleasure of speaking to Michael Stone, who will be talking to us about how to train our brain so that we can recreate our life reality and in turn master our life, a process he calls radical self-empowerment. Michael has a BS from the College of Chemistry at UC Berkeley, an MBA from the University of Southern California, and has been working on breaking through his own unconscious thinking patterns and self-limiting beliefs for 3 decades. In 2005, he started his breathwork teaching practice by facilitating holotropic breathwork workshops in 2009 for thousands of people in the Los Angeles area. Then in 2018, he birthed NeuroDynamic Breathwork in order to achieve his vision of allowing anybody in the world that wants to experience the benefits of expanded states of consciousness to be able to do so from the comfort of their own home. In the last 5 years, he has facilitated over 1,000 online sessions of neurodynamic breathwork with participants from over 120 countries and has been instrumental in creating a thriving worldwide breathing community to support a personal and global transformation and healing. In addition, he has co-created along with Saimi Nakamura, who is also one of the speakers in our summit, the Train Your Brain Master Course. He has also spoken at numerous international online summits, such as the Expanded States of Consciousness World Summit, excuse me, the Rewiring Your Brain World Summit, and the Trauma Super Conference, with other speakers such as Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins, Gabor Mate, Deepak Chopra, and many others. So, Michael, thank you so much for taking part in the Legend Life Summit. So, how are you going today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, getting started, as I mentioned, our theme today is all about reinvention and renewal. So I think it's beneficial for the audience and also a good way to get to know you. And also, our topic, if you could share perhaps some pivotal moments of reinvention and renewal in your life.
Yeah. So so just to give you a little background, I uh, had a pretty normal childhood. There wasn't anything super traumatic or anything like that. And as I was growing up, I saw my parents as, they seemed very happy together. I had a very, very positive kind of uh, view of their lives. And so in my brain, at least, I said, I want to be like my dad. He's happy. He's got a family. He's got a good job. He has security. That's for me. And it wasn't like I was thinking that consciously, but that's unconsciously, like your parents are your world when you're little. So I created this kind of definition of what success would look like when I was a little kid. And as I grew up, what I found was that I was doing very well in certain areas of my life, like for instance, in anything having to do with kind of this left brain thinking mind. So I would get straight A's in school. I ended up going to first high school and then college and then grad school. I got a good job. And, just like my father, I went to work for a big company and then I got promoted again, and ended up getting sent to Europe at a certain point. And everything seemed like it was on track in my head. And so I was in Europe for about a year and a half. And the interesting part was, even though on the outside I looked very successful, and it seemed like at least in my brain, I was doing well, there was this piece of myself that knew something was off, something was missing. And that was when I started to do my inner work. Because looking into the outside world, I could not figure out what the issue was. Everything seemed perfect. And so I started looking inside and started doing some work, from my with the tools that I had available to me at that time. I started thinking about, well, what are my goals in life, really? And I wrote them down, and I started to look at, okay, where did those goals come from? Are those really my goals? Because it doesn't seem like there's something off. And So as I started to take a deeper look, I started to see that these were goals that were my father's goals. And I had just kind of absorbed them, and they were in my unconscious mind, but there was a disconnect because they weren't making me happy being on this track. So that really started me on, okay, how do I really see what I want to do? What really is my destiny in life, as like a totally different individual than my father was. And that was when I really started to do a deep dive and look at, okay, what are these thinking patterns that have, brought me to this place? And more important, what are the definitions that I have in my brain about, like, for instance, what is success? I mean, that's a very important one. And what I saw was that from childhood, my definition of success was to have a life like my father, to have security, to have a job that is in a big company. So, that hopefully if you do a good job, you won't get fired. And then I could retire and kind of have fun kind of thing. And to have a family, with a couple kids. And I saw, okay, let's look at each one of these things and see if that's really the definition of success that really resonates with who I am and with my inner being. And when I started to look, I started to see that, like in my current job in France that I had, it's really there's no decisions that are made by individuals. It's all like group decisions. This is, it was just kind of like in the culture. This was back in the 80s. And so I really couldn't step out and say, I'm behind this. I want to get this done. I'll take responsibility for it. If I fail, if you want to fire me, fine. But if I'm successful, promote me, give me more money, kind of thing. I wanted the responsibility, and I wasn't getting it. So I saw that that was really something that wasn't working for me. And so I started to see that, okay, the only way to really get what I want is to have my own business, is to be my own boss. And so I really kind of dove in and saw that that's really the life that I wanted. I never even considered that as a possibility, because I kind of, again, saw myself that, my limitations were that, I can't do better than my father, so to speak. Like the amount of money that he made, that was kind of like, okay, if I make that amount of money, I'll be successful. He's taking care of his family with that amount of money. So I started to really look at each one of those things and open up new possibilities and start to recreate the definition of success for myself. And so that was like my first really, really big breakthrough. And where I saw that success was, first of all, being the person that I was born to be, really taking my innate talents and being able to use them and to allow myself to, build a business or be in a way in life where I could actually take these capabilities that I had and support other people to expand and grow, which I wasn't getting in my current job. I felt like I was kind of this cog in a machine, so to speak. Yes, there was security, but I wasn't getting the satisfaction of really feeling like I was contributing to people. So I started to see, okay, that's what I want my new definition of success to be. And when I started doing that and started envisioning the life that I wanted to have based on that, it was totally different than the life I had in that moment. So I started to visualize myself with my own business, having people working for me, making people's lives better. And I started to see how that would feel. And it felt amazing. I'm going, okay, this isn't working for me. Even though I was making a lot of money, I had a great job. I was like a vice president in a big company in France. They were paying for my apartment, for everything. It just wasn't working for me. So I quit my job, which was a huge thing for me because it really broke with these unconscious thinking patterns. And my ego mind started to go a bit crazy. What are you doing? Are you crazy? You've got a job for the rest of your life. You can retire and have fun. What are you thinking of? You're starting over. So, all these little like self-limiting thoughts were coming up because those are my beliefs that I had for 20, 30, 40 years. So, but I wasn't paying attention to them anymore. So I quit my job, went back to the United States, and started my own company. And I actually, like, the first company I started was with my mother. She was a psychologist, so we started, and then we built and sold that company. Then I started another company, built and sold that, and so it really allowed me to feel like I was contributing, because these were companies where we were making a difference in people's lives, where I really saw that, where I felt like I was kind of um, uh, achieving my mission in life, so to speak, and really taking these unique talents that everybody has. Everybody has their unique pathway in life that's really for them. You know, there's really only one job in life for each person, and that's being you. Every other job's taken. And so I was finally feeling like I was, channeling this kind of the, my inner self and projecting it into the world and making a difference. And so that was in the area of success. And in the same thing, like, another definition that's incredibly important is, what's your definition of work? And I had grown up feeling like, okay, work is something that I have to do in order to make enough money so I can support, the family that I wanted to have, so I can retire comfortably. I don't have to worry about it. And so I'm going to work, and if I'm not super happy at it, it's fine. But I'll enjoy myself in the evenings and the weekends, and I'll have a great retirement. And I thought, that doesn't work for me either. It's like, I can't spend 2/3 of my waking life so I can have fun in the other third. So I started to again, I shifted my definition of work. And so I changed my definition again of work to being in a career, and this is kind of connected to success for me, where I could support other people to expand and grow, and where I could develop my own skill sets, basically, and where I would feel satisfaction from my ability to contribute to people. So it was really about, and this was a really important distinction for me. When I was growing up, it was more like coming from a perspective of, what can I take from life? How can I kind of like take enough so that I have enough money to retire and stuff like that. It wasn't in my head about contributing. And again, so this was all about things that I'd absorbed that were completely unconscious when I was little. And it was only when I started to really dive in and do my own inner work and see what was really at the bottom of all of this. Like, your definitions are so deeply ingrained that it's like kind of a fish swimming in water. And your beliefs are like that too sometimes. It's like, you don't even know that you're reacting out of those beliefs, because you just feel like that's the truth. That's the way life is, that it's not a belief, because it's so deep in your unconscious mind. And I started to see that I need to really start to creating practices where I can look and see what's going on in my unconscious mind, and seeing does that support where I want to go in life, or is it holding me back? And if it's holding me back, how do I change my belief systems, change my definitions, so it really allows me to live the life that I dream of? And the other area was with relationships. And that area I just couldn't get to the bottom of for another decade. It was like, no matter how much I tried, I couldn't really see what was going on underneath the covers. I would just go from one relationship to the other, and it would never work. And I kept thinking, oh, I just haven't met the right woman yet. There's so many people out there. And what I didn't see was that the one common thing in all these relationships wasn't the other person, it was me. It had nothing to do with them. Again, it was something internal that I had to shift, but at that moment, I couldn't get to the bottom of it. It was only like many, many years later, when I got into breathwork, which we'll talk about a little later, where I got to the bottom of what was going on with relationships.
Very good. So now you've given us a kind of like a very good perspective. So you've had lots of kind of like reinventions and renewals, and then I think the takeaway message is that for many of us, our outer world is a reflection of our inner world, but we don't really understand what our inner world is, because we've managed to get into autopilot, and we're just living our lives assuming this is perfectly normal, that we're not being influenced by anything. Our reality is our reality, but it's not actually our reality, because we're actually living whatever patterns we've developed throughout our life, and they're kind of like constructing the reality we now live in. So the curious thing for me is that like you're a pretty intuitive guy to want to have to uncover this because I'd assume that the majority of people don't go through this kind of like self-search. They kind of like find other ways to distract themselves from where they're kind of like feeling.
Mhm.
Most people who, unless they're on the right path because they've created this path for themselves, would sense something's off, but then they turn to other kind of like things to kind of like distract them, assuming nothing is really wrong, and then they just kind of like need to kind of like not really feel it. Whereas you said, no, I got to feel it, and then I've got to dive in and really kind of like understand, what's going on. So I think that's an interesting thing. What do you think made it possible for you to make that shift? Because so many people wouldn't have made that shift and would have continued. And probably if I was speaking to someone like yourself, who's probably is retired now, worked in that company until the metaphoric gold watch came their direction. So what do you think about yourself made you kind of like change direction where so many wouldn't have made the change?
I think for me, for many, many years, I could feel that there was something a little bit off, but it wasn't intense enough for me to really make a change. I could kind of push it off to the side. But when I got to a certain point when I was in France, I'd been there about a year and a half, I got to be to a point where I was very unhappy. And I think to a certain point, at least for me, I had to be miserable enough that I'm saying, I can't go on like this to really look at what's going on. It's so much, like we're kind of designed to stay on a path of comfort. And that's what I was doing. It's like I was in a very comfortable job. I was getting lots of money and stuff like that. So it really took me getting to a place where I was so unhappy that I really had to take a look. And there was no way of kind of disguising it anymore. I wish it hadn't been like that, that I'd have done it earlier when I could just kind of feel these kind of inner things where something was a little bit off. But then like you said, I would just kind of, when I felt like that, I would watch TV or distract myself or whatever. But then it got to be so kind of intense that I just couldn't do that anymore. So I really had to start to look and see what was going on because I couldn't really stay in my life like that. It wasn't possible.
Awesome.
So I think to a certain point, you have to get so kind of unhappy with what's going on to really give yourself this push to really dive into the discomfort and to open yourself up to the possibility that, at first I got to this place where, oh my God, it's like I've wasted 10 or 15 years of my life going in the wrong direction. And so I had to process through that. That was very uncomfortable. And, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? Like all this stuff that came up. So you really have to have a willingness to process through some discomfort and to have and be uncomfortable enough and unhappy enough to really process through. At least that's how it was for me. For other people, maybe it wouldn't be like that. But that's kind of how it worked for me.
Very good. Well, now let's deep dive a little bit more into memories and perception of reality and how you started pulling this all apart to kind of like realize that the reality you were living was created by you and then wasn't the kind of reality you really wanted. It was kind of like created by all these patterns you had kind of learned. Because I think this will be new territory for a lot of people who don't really realize that they are the creators of their reality, and that creation is through past experiences, especially childhood experiences, may be reflected in the kind of decisions and thoughts they're currently having. So perhaps you can explain a little bit more about what's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the directions that I went in once I started to look at all this stuff, I said, I have to have a better understanding of what's really going on in my brain and how it works in order to be able to actually start to shift these definitions in order to understand what do I have to do on a continuous basis to really make this change stick. That's really important. It's kind of like I think many people have these insights into what they need to do, but they don't do it. it's kind of like seeing the path and walking the path are very different things. So I decided I really wanted to take some time to really understand what's going on underneath the covers. And at that point, I had this kind of viewpoint, as I was growing up, that my memories were a certain way. This is the way things happened. And it was kind of like, as things happened, it was kind of like this little videotape that was being recorded. It was in my brain. When I pulled it back up, I'd see what happened. And also with perception that, what I would see was what was out there, and it's the same as everybody sees. That's just kind of like, it's intuitive. And, your projected future is based primarily on your memories and your perception, basically, because you take your past and project it into your future. And so I said, okay, that's intuitive, but is that really true? So I started doing some research and to see, okay, how does this really work, into neuroscience? So let me do a little screen share here. Okay, so again, as I said, the common beliefs are 63% of people surveyed think that human memory works like a video camera, accurately recording the events we see and hear so that we can review and inspect them later. And 47% of people surveyed think that once you have experienced an event and formed a memory of it, that memory doesn't change. So I'm just going to basically do a quick memory test. This will just be kind of fun. And so we're going to test your short-term memory. And so I'm going to show you a list of words. And it's only 15 words. And what I want you to do is I'm going to just show them to you for 30 seconds and then go on to something else for a minute and then have you write down whatever words you remember, basically. So just to see if even after just a minute, can you remember just even 15 words? And this is just short-term memory. We're not even talking about long-term memory. So here we go. Okay, so your job is I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds. And I want you to try to just remember these words. And don't write them down now, just for remembering them. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So this is an example of a short-term kind of memory test, just like we're doing right now, where they did a study where the subjects were led to a graduate student office and asked to wait there for a minute. And 30 seconds later, they were led into another room and asked to write down a list of everything they'd seen in the waiting room. It was just a typical grad student office with desk chairs. And 30% recalled that there were books there, even though there were no books. And basically what's happening is that your memory is reconstructed based not only on what was there, but what you think should have been there or what you expected to be there. So they basically made up these books that were there that didn't exist at all. So it's important to understand that sometimes you will actually remember things that weren't there just because you expect them to be there. So now at this point, if you can just take out a pencil and paper and write down as many of those words in the prior slide as you can. And just to see how many, again, this has just been about a minute, and how many of the 15 words can you remember just a minute later? Okay. Are you ready, Damien?
Yep.
Have you written down the ones you remember?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So my next question is, how many of you remembered the word sleep? Was that one of the ones that you remembered from the list?
I
Damien?
didn't. No, I didn't.
Okay. So let's go back to the list now, and you can see. So my question is, so the reason I asked that is because sleep is actually not on the list, but more than 40% of people that do this test actually write down sleep because it's associated with all these other words. So your brain works by association. And you can check to see, were there any other words that weren't on the list that you put down? And how many of these did you remember out of 15? Damien, how about you?
I remember 9.
Okay, and were they all accurate?
Yes, they were all accurate.
Okay, good. All right, so basically 60%. And that's only like 1 minute later, basically. So that's kind of about short-term memory. But let's talk about long-term memory for a second too, because obviously if short-term memory, you can only remember 60% of what's there 1 minute later, you have to wonder, well, what about long-term memory, which is what we really base our life on. So basically, when something goes to long-term memory, we don't encode everything in perfect detail. We can't tell the difference between what we recall from what actually happened and what our brain constructs based on association and prior knowledge and expectation. So what's stored in memory is not an exact replica of reality, but a recreation of it, and memories are reconstructed rather than played back each time we recall them. So every time we change our belief system, we rewrite our memories to agree with our belief system. So just an example of a study that was done. They took 100 people in 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, midlife, and asked them or gave them a questionnaire for end of life decisions. Like, for instance, if you were on a respirator and that was the only way you could live, would you want to stay alive? And then a year later, they gave them the same questionnaire, and 23% of them changed their decisions, which is kind of normal. People do change their decisions. But the interesting part is that 75% of those who changed their decisions insisted that the year before they had answered exactly the same. And even when they were showed their questionnaire from a year before where it was different, they said, oh, I don't believe that was, they couldn't believe it because their brain had changed their past to not be in dissonance with what their current worldview was. So your memories are constantly shifting and changing every time you change your worldview. So it's kind of like a good news, bad news thing in the sense that, can you trust your memories to be exactly how they were? No. But what it means is that every time you change your worldview in the present, you're not only changing your kind of projected future, but you're also, in a sense, changing your past and the meaning that you're creating from your past. So it's incredibly freeing in that you don't have to be dominated by your past or held back by your past. Everything can be shifted from this moment back into your past and into the future.
No, that's very powerful information because most people don't believe they can change their future, number one. So they've already created their limitation. And then the very fact that our belief system has that much of an impact on our lives, both past and present. So it does give us the rallying call that we all need to kind of like really start to question, when we make a decision, and then how's that decision related to, is this really what the correct way to do this thing, or is it just based on some kind of belief or misconception or perception I've created, especially if the consequences for us are kind of like negative and that we don't feel like fulfilled, we're not happy, something doesn't feel congruent. So it does give us reason to kind of like really investigate what's actually going on. So So I guess also when we're making, so what happens over time, if we keep on repeating these kind of patterns, it actually becomes our default, doesn't it? So like
Yes.
we're just kind of like repeating all the time the same thing over and over again because the brain is kind of like through neuroscience, kind of like created these patterns in our brain because it's the easy way to do things. And that's our perspective with regard anything that looks similar to a past experience. And then it just keeps on going, well, this is the default. Let's keep on doing this. So now let's go on, but we can change this, can't we? So this is the
Yes.
important information we need to understand.
Right. And the first thing to really understand is that when you're feeling something isn't resonant, when there's that kind of just kind of intuitive sense that you have that something's not right with your life, it's really important to pay attention to that. It's kind of like everybody has what I call an inner guiding intelligence. Other people call it different things like intuitive self, higher self, future self, or whatever. But this deeper part of our psyche that already has all the answers that we need. And it's incredibly important to stay connected to that amazing inner resource that we have. And it's trying to talk to us. You know, when we're having this feeling that something's not right, it's trying to get our attention, basically. And we ignore it at our own risk, in essence. Because, you know, this is the part of our psyche that it's working for us. It wants us to be fulfilled. It wants us to be whole and happy in the same way that our body always has these trillions of cells working together to try to bring us back towards wholeness and health. Our psyche has that same drive and also wants to bring us back to a state of wholeness and health psychologically. So it's, you know, those are kind of the kind of symptoms, so to speak, that are giving us a message that we need to really start to turn our attention and focus inside into our inner world. And there's many different ways to do that. You know, there's not just one, and to really see what's going on and to really listen to ourselves and pay attention to ourselves. We're kind of in this society, in this culture, at least in the United States, we're taught from childhood that we need to have the outside world in order to make us happy, in order to be a certain way, that the answer lies in the outside world. If we really believed that all the answers lie within, capitalism would fall apart. Because, like, if you look at an advertising, what are they really saying? They're saying, basically, Damien, you're not happy right now. But if you buy my car, you will be happy. You'll get the woman you want. Or if you buy this bigger house, Damien, you'll be amazingly happy. You know, you'll be fulfilled. Otherwise, you wouldn't buy stuff. You know, why do you keep needing like the newest of this and the newest of that and like keeping up with the neighbors and stuff like that? But that's been kind of the sea that we've been swimming in for our entire lives. And so we have this kind of neural pathway that's conditioned that we need to look into the outside world for the answers. And once we start to see that we do have this inner resource that already has all the answers that we need, that's the step on our pathway to self-empowerment and to, as you said, to radical self-empowerment. When we see that we don't need to be liked by other people in order to feel good about ourselves. We don't need to buy stuff to be happy. You know, it's the answers are within us, and that's not the direction that we need to go once we start listening to our inner guidance. So that's really like the first step in kind of looking into your inner world and starting to develop practices in your life to stay connected to yourself and to start strengthening that neural pathway instead of the neural pathway where you're giving up your power to the outside world in order to, you know, be happy or to create the life that you want.
So before we talk about the pathways to access this inner intelligence, I'm kind of curious, what is this inner consciousness? Is this something like I'm just going to hand it over to you because like I don't know what the answer is. Like I'm going to have to be honest here. Higher power and all of this kind of thing is kind of like mumbo jumbo to me. There may be something out there, but I prefer to take the Buddhist line. It's beyond my intelligence to kind of like really worry about that. So what is it? Is there, because you've done a lot of research in this, is there some kind of like scientific explanation? What is this inner awareness? Is it like we have this ego mind, which is trying to interpret things, predict what we need to do using past information, so keep us safe and secure. But somewhere there's another part of our brain which is taking information, and hopefully it's taking it in a little bit more unfiltered. So it's like processing. Is that what it is, or is it something else?
Well, basically, the way I would describe it is, one second. When we take in information, our conscious mind can only take in about 5%. The other 95% goes straight to our unconscious mind. And that's where the action is, basically. So when I talk about this inner guidance, it's basically a combination of what's stored in our unconscious mind, kind of what's, kind of under the surface, and also this kind of connection to this universal field of information. Joe Dispenza calls it the quantum field. Different. It's some people call it the morphogenetic field. There's all different kinds of names for it. And I would say, in terms of the science behind it, like it's all theory, obviously, but everybody's had these situations where they kind of just intuitively know this is what I need to do, even though it doesn't come from their logical mind. It comes from some deeper source. Like for me, when I quit my job, even though my ego mind was telling me I was crazy, I knew I had to do it. There wasn't any question. It wasn't like this discussion back and forth. I just knew that that's what I had to do. I think everybody has those moments where they just know. And that's where they're connecting to this inner guidance. So I think part of it is just experiential, where everybody has those types of experiences. And part of it is obviously, since we don't, even in science, don't really totally understand consciousness right now. It's one of the big mysteries still left. It is a theory, but part of theory is looking at the evidence and seeing if the evidence supports that theory. And we see people like, for instance, many of the big inventions in the world, they don't happen when people are trying to figure them out. When they're working, like they'll happen when someone's just laying in the bath and they're not thinking, and they just connect to this inner guidance and the answer comes. So I would say, that's basically, from a science perspective, it's more like there's evidence out there, and it is a theory that's supported by many, many scientists at this point. Although there's also, other theories that say that doesn't exist too. It's not like universally accepted, basically, I would say. But for me, that there's enough evidence out there in my own experience in life and with other people that I've seen and with people that I respect, like Joe Dispenza and other people that also, and he's done like gazillions of MRIs and brain scans where he sees these changes in brain scans when people are accessing this kind of quantum field or inner wisdom.
Very good. So how do we access this? So you mentioned there are a number of different practices that can help us access this so we can develop this connection, because now most of us are not connected and we're kind of like just living in the conscious mind. We're not really utilizing all the resources we have available. So how do we get access to what we innately have in the first place?
So the first one I would say, and the one that I started with, was looking at, in the major areas of your life, like success, work, love, that type of thing. What are your definitions? What are your definitions of being successful in those areas? And then writing them down. And if you can't really get in touch, look at your life, because your brain will always try to take you towards achieving what your definitions of success are. You're kind of giving it a job. So if you have a certain type of work, on some level, that was your definition of success, even if logically it doesn't seem like it. So it's really looking at, what is your definition in those areas and writing it all down. And then looking at, do those definitions serve you? Are they taking you in the direction that you want your life to go? And if not, what are some different new definitions that will inspire you more and move you towards your desired future? And just basically doing that process in each of the major areas of your life. I talked to you a little bit about how I did that with work and success. I also did it with love at one point, and it was a huge opening for me in seeing that when I was looking at a relationship, I was really looking at what can I get from the relationship. Just feeling loved and cared for, feeling safe, that kind of thing. And what I saw was that wasn't on a deep level really what I wanted a relationship to look like, that it was more about what can I bring to the relationship? How can I support the other person to expand and grow? I really got this insight that it doesn't work like that. You can't take first. It's like you've got to put out and then it comes back. That's how I started to see how life worked. And the more you give, the more you get. So I started to see that my definition of a relationship is where I can be with someone where both of us can support each other's expansion and growth. And that changed everything in terms of how I was being in a relationship. And it was one of the big blocks in terms of me opening up the possibility of having a successful relationship. So really looking in those areas and seeing, do the definitions support you? If not, creating new definitions that do support you. And then every morning looking at your definitions, working with them, making them real for yourself. And then at the end of the day, you can say, did I live my life in congruence with those definitions in those areas today? So that's one possible tool. The second tool that I use is, your brain is incredibly powerful in terms of creating the reality that you tell it you want. It's a reality creating machine. And so it's incredibly important to see what instructions are you giving your brain. And one of the things that's important is, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, about kind of setting your vision and setting your goals. But once you set your vision and goals, it's like you want your brain to start finding solutions for you. You're kind of giving it a job. And so, but in order to be successful at that, it has to trust you. In other words, when you say something, it's going to happen. So it's incredibly important to keep your word, basically. When you say something's going to happen, make sure it happens. So for instance, if you say, let's say you're going to Christmas with your family and you say, oh yeah, I'm going to be there on time at 12:30, and you show up at 12:45, your brain is listening. Okay, he said I was going to be here at 12:30. It didn't happen. Can't trust. What he says doesn't happen. And, many things you think it's really not important if I say things are going to be a certain way. And then, well, what difference does it make if I'm there 15 or 20 minutes late or whatever? But it really is important because you're training your brain, basically. And once you start making sure that, like, when you give your word on something or say that something's going to happen, you're really committed to it, and it really does happen, you start to teach your brain that when you say something, it's going to happen, and I'm going to find a solution on how to get there because I know it's going to happen. So you start to make it real for yourself. So that's the second thing, what you give your word on, what you say is going to happen is incredibly powerful in moving you forward. So you want to just watch that very carefully. The third thing is you want to create a vision for yourself. And so, for instance, write down does your perfect world look like, and write it down in as much detail as you can, and set goals. Set goals like let's say you have a vision of my world is going to look like this in 3 years or whatever. Set goals, but don't just set a goal in 3 years. Set it in 2 years, in 1 year, in 6 months, in 3 months. And also set your goals big. Don't set goals that even if you coast, you can achieve them. You want to make it so there's stretch goals. So you have to step into discomfort, basically, in order to move it. You have to expand and grow in order to reach your goals. And once you do that, you want to give yourself small wins every day. So keep a journal. And even if you took one teeny little step towards your goal, just write it down. This is what I did today. Because when your brain gets these little small wins, it encourages it in order to keep going and then keep going on the next day and the next day and the next day. So keep giving yourself positive feedback. And also do daily visualizations and visualize you being in this perfect world that you're creating and seeing, how does that make you feel? What does it feel like to be in this perfect world where you have the job of your dreams, where you have the relationship of your dreams? and really imprint that feeling. And your brain cannot tell the difference between what you're imagining and what's really out there in the world. And so if you can create this real enough and start to anchor it with an emotion, it's incredibly powerful in pushing you forward and towards actually reaching the goal. So those are some of the things. And also just another thing that I wanted to touch on is that we generally think that the way that we see things in the world are the way things are. And that's not at all how it works. Basically, we see things through screens and filters. And what we see out there is actually comes in, and it's just a bunch of dots and circles at the beginning, and our brain basically interprets it in a way that's useful for us to navigate this reality. It doesn't really care what's out there. It just wants to make it useful for us so we can survive, basically. Originally, that was the original purpose, and keep the species going. So it's going to see what is useful to see. So for instance, many times when, like, let's say you're in a car, or you'll hear a story about a car and someone in a motorcycle turned in front of the car hits the motorcycle, and the person said, I didn't even see the motorcycle. That may actually be true because they weren't expecting to see the motorcycle. So basically what your perception is colored by your expectations, your history of what's possible and what's not possible. All those things color your reality, basically. And what actually, how your brain takes in what's out there and how it interprets it and makes meanings out of it. So every person has their own reality based on their own reality filter, in essence. So, when we're talking to someone, we expect them that they're seeing life through the same reality filter as we do. And it's completely false. Everybody has their own world that they create. And when you start looking and changing the lens through which you see your world, you'll start seeing different things in the world. Like, for instance, if you feel like the world is an unsafe place, you're giving your brain a job. Find everything in the world that looks like it's unsafe. And everything that feels like it's safe, just ignore that. We're not going to take that in. So you're basically giving your brain a job based on your filters to only basically perceive certain things. And that's the other reason why it's incredibly important to really look at what are your filters, what are your belief systems about the world, because your brain will collect evidence to support those belief systems. So all of this is just incredibly important work to change your reality and to manifest the life that you want, and to really, especially as you get older. And, many people feel like, well, when I get to a certain age, I can't change anymore. There's even these sayings from back when I was a kid, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And people used to believe that, and science used to say that, but that's completely shifted with neuroscience right now. You can expand and grow till the day that you die. You can grow new neural pathways. And it just doesn't work. The brain doesn't work like the way that we thought it worked like 30, 40 years ago. And basically, it's a question of continuing to try new things, to continuing to step out of your comfort zone, and more importantly, continuing to do your inner work and really getting to the bottom of what's really driving your actions, what's driving you forward, and is it are you heading in the right direction or not? This autopilot, and if so, you want to look inside where you can actually take it, disconnect the autopilot basically, and start consciously leading yourself in the direction that you want. It makes all the difference.
No, most definitely. So beyond these practices, which are useful for helping us kind of like start developing the right processes, so inner work, identify what might be holding you back, look at the world you want to go towards. So these are some practical ways we can on a daily basis work towards creating the world we're looking for. But we still need to kind of like look at how we can really connect to the inner kind of like consciousness, which is here to kind of like really help us kind of like give us the foundation to work from to go forward. So there's some additional practices that you're going to share with us for how we can access this inner consciousness. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. And as I was doing this work, I was seeing it's not always easy to really get down and see what your definitions are. They're really, it's like you're a fish in water. So I was looking at what are some practices that can really kind of streamline my ability to get in touch with these unconscious beliefs and definitions and that type of thing. And at a certain point, I was still struggling with my relationship issue, even though I gotten certain pieces of it. I hadn't totally gotten to the bottom of it. I ended up going down to Peru with a woman that I was interested in, and she wanted to go to Peru. So I said, all right, let's go. And I figured I could get her away for a week. Let's see if this can work out after I had so many relationship failures. And once we got down there, we went out on the Amazon in this place that a woman had bought to kind of preserve the Amazon. And it was just her and me and this local shaman that went out with us. And so he said, would you guys like to participate in this religious ceremony that we do down here? So she's already always like, yeah, let's do this. I'm going, I'm science mind. I don't just say yes to things like that. I'm going, what do I have to do here? And so he said, oh, it's very simple. I just go out into the rainforest and I find these vines and these leaves. I mix them all together. I boil them up and you drink it down. And then you just see what happens. So my original reaction is, you have got to be kidding. I'm a chemical engineer, right? You mix like 0.52 grams of this and 0.60. You don't just make a witch's brew and a 4-hour canoe ride from nowhere and drink it up and see what happens. So, but she's going, oh, we have to do this. This is going to be great. So I'm going, oh, I have this battle in my brain behind the science mind going, you are not going to do this. And the other part of my brain going, well, you came all the way down here to see if this could work with this woman. If you don't do this, it's over for the week. It's done. She's going to think you're a wimp. And that was actually a big breakthrough for me in terms of I just kind of let go and surrendered to the process and said, okay, I'm down here. I've had a good life. If I die today, it's in the rainforest, whatever, let's go for it. It was very kind of not typical of what I would do. And so I did it, and it turned out to be ayahuasca, which I'd never heard of before. And I had this amazing experience of connection to the universe that I'd never had before. I'd always felt like, and I didn't really know why, it was kind of like me against the world, and where I had to protect myself. And of course, since I felt like that, I was collecting evidence for it. So it seemed very real for me. So when I got back to the United States, I'm going, okay, if I can have that kind of experience of deep connection that I'd never had before with a substance, there has to be other ways to kind of connect to those brain receptors without, putting a substance in my body. And ultimately, that brought me to breathwork. And I didn't know anything about breathwork before that, but I started to kind of do, Google searches to see, what's similar to, or what can give you these types of experiences. And so I tried it. And I originally tried something called holotropic breathwork, which was developed by Dr. Stan Grof. And he developed it through his experiences of people accessing these, what he calls non-ordinary states of consciousness with LSD, actually. And he also wanted to recreate those types of experiences in a safe way without using a substance. And so he developed a whole modality around that, through like experimentation, seeing what people had used in historical society, consciousness theory, all of that. And so I did a couple of the experiences, had amazing experiences again. And maybe like 2 months later, when I got into breathwork, I finally got to the bottom of what is going on with these relationships. And this is an example of how I really dove into an expanded state of consciousness and got below my ego mind. Because basically breathwork, through like faster, deeper breathing, creates certain physiological changes in your body that basically quiet the ego mind. And where your blood gets more alkaline, and there's certain parts of your brain that get a little bit less blood flow and activity, the default mode network, which is responsible for these concepts of self and ego. And so when that's quieted down and all this chit-chat thoughts go away, you do connect to this deeper part of your psyche and have a different experience of life. So I went back and dove into One of the types of experiences, you can have visuals and go back into your childhood and see things from a different perspective. And so I had this experience of going back to when I was like about 9 years old. And I was talking to my mother, who I kept asking her about her childhood. And she explained to me, she was a German Jew, and she, had to kind of run for her life when the Nazis took over. And her family had been ensconced in her town's life for over 200 years. One of her ancestors, saved the town because he paid Napoleon to go around and not burn it down. He had a lot of money. My grandfather was a World War I hero. And all of a sudden, from almost one day to the next, she had to run for her life. Now, she'd already come to terms with this. She'd already done her own work in a sense. But me as a child, I made this unconscious decision. The world is an unsafe place. If you can't trust your country, and all of her friends turned against her, you can't trust your friends, what can you trust? And that was this pattern that was running my life in relationships. So when I got to a certain point in relationships where I got close to the person and I had to really open myself to be vulnerable, this thinking pattern kicked in and said, no, it's not safe. You can't go here. But it was unconscious. I had no idea. But that's why all my relationships were failing. I would just kind of shut down at a certain point. And once I saw the mechanism that was going on, I could start to work with it. And instead of having it hold me back, it isn't just having the insight. You have to really then turn it into a practice. I said, okay, I'm going to create a practice so that when this kind of feeling comes up that I want to shut down, I'm going to share it with the other person and tell them what's going on to create closeness instead of kind of pulling back. And that changed everything. That started me on the pathway towards having successful relationships, along with all the other work. That was the missing piece, the missing jigsaw piece, to the point where now I'm in a relationships that's lasted over a decade. That could never have happened before. So what I found was that breathwork is really like this fast track method of being able to shut down the ego mind and really diving into and really seeing, what is going on underneath the covers. What are these unconscious thinking patterns? What are your definitions? And then once you actually are able to bring them to consciousness, you can start to create practices to work with them. So after doing holotropic breathwork for a while, I decided to create my own breathwork modality that would really, really focus on being able to get in touch with with your inner intelligence, basically, and to allow yourself to have these healing experiences. And people have all different kinds of experiences. They have sensory releases where they shake or shiver. They have visual experiences. They can connect to the universe. Sometimes they feel like they're having rebirthing experiences where they're releasing trauma from the birth process. Or they have these biographical experiences, like I said, where you kind of go back into your childhood and you see things from a different perspective, from a more empowering perspective. And so I said, okay, I want to do something that can really allow enough people to access this, that it can really make a difference in the world, so that people can start to feel more empowered and to shine their light into the world more effectively, and to give them this powerful tool. Because my original breathwork could only be done in person. So it was quite limited. So I developed my own modality that can be done online, where you can do it from the comfort of your own home in a 2-hour experience in a very inexpensive way, with my goal of really making a shift in world consciousness. That was kind of like my stretch goal, my vision of, what I wanted to contribute to the world. And, as Albert Einstein said, you can't change a problem from the same level of consciousness that you created it from. And if we stay on this pathway we're on right now, there won't be much of a world left anymore in a couple hundred years. So something has to shift. So that was what I saw, what I wanted to contribute to the world.
Awesome.
And I did want to just share like a couple of experiences that people have had in the breathwork, if that's okay, Damien.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay, just to give you a sense, I can talk about it, but I'd rather have you hear it from other people in their own words. So hang on a second. Okay, so these are just like a few shares that people have had after they've done And my breath work I call NeuroDynamic Breathwork. So after they've participated for a while. And so just a few samples. And so the first one is from Monica, who said, I started breathwork when I was 42. Today I'm 51. When I walked into the first workshop, I was a broken woman. My life dominated by darkness and thoughts of ending my life permeating my day-to-day life. Today, my life is void of suffering, full of mental and emotional freedom, love and self-acceptance. I wake up every day feeling insatiable zest for life and hope to live another 50 years to get to all the things I want to do. And then the next share is from Karen, who's 77. And she said, since I established a regular neurodynamic breathwork practice 7 months ago, I have become a different person. I've been shown my unconscious patterns and how they damage my relationships and been able to change them. I've been clear about generational issues in my family and in resolving these in myself. I believe I've made a vital difference to those who come after me. I'm no longer frightened of anyone or anything. I've abandoned many of the irrational rules and beliefs I was taught as a child. When I look at these closely, quite a few made me laugh at their absurdity. I feel free. I feel wholly myself again. I feel blessed and full of gratitude for all I've been given. I enjoy my life and its many small pleasures. A friend said, you look different. You are full of grace. It seems to me that the work I'm doing is absolutely relevant now. And again, she's 77 years old. So it really, it doesn't matter how old you are. And then just one last one here. Each breathwork session has given me a glimpse of my subconscious mind. This is where all of my memories, thoughts, and just about everything that's happened in my life is stored. During breathwork sessions, I can access these memories to help me see old patterns that have held me back over the years. This all comes from within me to help me understand what caused this feeling of behavior that no longer serves me. There are no judgments. This new perspective that I get from these sessions has completely changed my view of who I am and what I'm capable of. And that's Ruddy. And I just wanted to give you a little more sense of him. Just give me a moment. Okay, so this is just a couple minute little, and he's 78. So let me just get this going here.
I like being almost a kid again. That feeling of looking at the world through a child's eye. And I think that's a lot of what breathwork has done. It's brought that back for me. My name is Ruddy Havel, and I am 79 years old. I've been doing breathwork for about a year now, and it's changed my life in so many different ways. I didn't expect much because I hadn't gotten much in the past. So I was just really shocked at how I changed drastically in the first 6 months. And I'm still changing. I appreciate everything that I have much more than I used to. I took things for granted before. I don't take anything for granted now. I look in the mirror and say, who is that guy? He didn't smile this much before. He didn't laugh this much before. He isn't having fun. I'm a lot softer and gentler. I laugh more. I don't worry about 90% of things I used to. It's a gift to be alive. It's a gift. That's the biggest thing. Before I say, oh, you mean I have to spend another 20 years on this planet? What am I going to do? Now I can't wait to get up and do it. Life is too precious to waste. Life is too valuable to squander, too valuable to worry about. You just get out there and do it. And I had no idea what I was stepping into when I started breathwork. I would recommend breathwork to everybody. It doesn't matter what age you are. I started when I was 78, and now I'm 58.
Very good. So I like the last part where he says he's 58.
Yeah, exactly. 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's I like that last part too. But and really like the reason I chose those particular examples is it's really important to know that no matter what age you are, you can always create these incredible shifts in your life. If you're 20, if you're 50, if you're 70, if you're 80, you're never too old to change. You're never too old to bring joy into every day and to really shine your light into the world. So I really just want to encourage people, if you feel like it's too late, you can't change, it's not supported by neuroscience, it's not supported by people's experiences, and you can change and you can have the life of your dreams, no matter what age you are, no matter where you're starting from. So, and again, breath work is not the only pathway. That breath work has been kind of like my golden key and kind of what I just from myself want to bring to the world, because I see how much of a difference it makes in people's lives. But other people use other pathways. Some people feel like this meditation, for instance, get this very profound effect. But this is a pathway that's really created this shortcut for me, basically, to on a regular basis really being able to connect and see what's happening under the surface and then be able to do something about it. But it's not a magic pill. You still have to do the work. Ruddy's been doing breath work for a year. It wasn't like he had one session and he said, I'm fixed, I'm going to go out there and, like that. You need to start creating these new neural pathways. And you create them with repetition and consistency. So it's really about first getting the insight and then making a commitment to bringing it into your life, creating practices, repeating, being consistent. And your brain's always going to have an excuse every day of why you can't do this or can't do that or don't have time to do this or don't have time. Even in breath work, people share in that, today my ego mind was saying, you don't really need to go today. And then they go and they have this amazing experience because the ego mind hates change. And it's just an evolution thing. There's risk with change, so it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that the ego mind doesn't really care if we expand or grow. It wants to keep us alive. So if we need to really step beyond, if our goal is to expand and grow and really be the person we were born to be.
Awesome. And just for the audience's information, we have a sample of what neurodynamic breathwork is like. It'll be in the wellness studio. So Michael guides us through a small piece of one of the neurodynamic sessions. So it's a good opportunity for you to experience what it would be like to actually do the full process, which I believe goes for 2 hours. So so I recommend you give that a try. It's very useful. So because we're kind of like getting up on time here, so I thought we'd finish off with a couple quick questions I'd like to ask each of our speakers. So what does limitless living mean to you?
That's a good question. Um, I would say that for me, limitless living is being able and willing to go into your unconscious mind and to really look at what's holding us back in our everyday life and really being the person that we want to be. So this is more about understanding that the limits that we have for ourselves aren't really limits. They're limits that we've created through these conditionings that we've picked up from our society, from our past, from our parents, and then are running our lives. And ultimately, we really do have access to this unlimited field of possibility if we do the work and really are committed to creating the life of our dreams and envisioning it and tapping into this amazing inner guiding intelligence that we all have.
Awesome. What does ageless living mean to you?
Really, age is a number. It's a concept, basically. And ageless living really means that in every moment we keep in mind that we can continue to expand and grow. And for me, ageless living, part of it has to do with understanding that how we feel, the age that we feel, just like Ruddy, it's really about how do we experience life. It isn't about if we're 80 or 40. Some people who are 20 years old feel like they're 100 and they're bored with life. Other people who are like Ruddy feel like, life is just this incredible gift and are just in this place of joy when they get up in the morning. So really letting go of these concepts that we have about age and really looking more about how can I fully experience life in every moment, whether I'm 100 or whether I'm 20.
Very good. What advice would you give to someone who's approaching 40, who's recently turned 40, who's unfulfilled and dissatisfied with their life?
It's never too late. And everything that has happened to you in your life so far, every experience you had, has been an important step in your pathway towards being the person that you are today. And clearly, by coming to the summit and investigating, you are now open to actually opening up new possibilities in your life. And just looking really at your past in terms of it's exactly what needed to happen in order to get you to the place you are today, where you can now open up any possibility that you want to in your life.
Brilliant. Do you have a life philosophy or mantra you live by?
Yes. I would say my mantra or in life is that there's many different lenses through which you can see life. And it's always, ultimately, if you do your inner work, you can make it a choice instead of automatic. And for me, the choice that I make every morning consciously as I go through my day is that in life, again, there's disarray, there's ugliness, but there's also beauty. And in every moment, I choose to see the beauty.
Very good.
And that makes all the difference. Like, I used to love watching horror movies and stuff like that. I have no interest in that anymore.
Very good. So what a free life. Well, you just turn on the news, you've got your horror movie if you want it.
You know what? I don't watch the news anymore.
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah. It's interesting because the news isn't the news. What the news is what they're picking out certain tidbits. And what is their goal? Their goal is to activate you emotionally so you come and, watch the next day, to have some drama coming up that excites you so that you continue to read the newspaper. You don't see stuff about, like on YouTube, many times I watch these little shows of acts of kindness and watch 10 minutes of that. And that is just incredibly inspiring to me. You don't see that kind of stuff on the news.
No.
You see about wars here and about people dying and getting blown up and, oh my God, I got to see what's going to happen tomorrow, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just, don't choose to, see life through that lens anymore. So, it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. So what are 3 life lessons you've learned in life that you think would be of value to others?
Really, the most important things that I've learned in life is that, at least for me to feel happy and satisfied, it's looking through a lens of, in every moment, what can I bring to life? What can I contribute to life? Not what can I get from life? And that's what's really allowed me to, what really allowed me to, create NeuroDynamic Breathwork. I had to go through a pretty difficult process of working through some thinking patterns. I did it when I was already almost 65 years old. And I was these thinking patterns. I'm 65 years old. I've never done anything online. Who do I think I am? That's for 20-year-olds. Am I crazy? What am I doing here? And also, like, I really didn't like social media. It was like, I'm going, what's so interesting about all this stuff? And so I said, okay, I'm going to try it out. So I opened a Facebook account. I said, let's see what people are talking about. And as I started looking around, all they talk about is what they had for breakfast and pictures of their freaking pets. What is everybody seeing this? So I had to get over that too, because I really had to get into social media if I was going to really, bring this to the world where I was going to impact enough people to make a difference. And I'd gotten only 5,000 people on my mail list in holotropic breathwork for like almost a decade. And I had to open up a new possibility is I can do more than this. If I commit to bringing this to the world, I can get beyond this. Like, I'm never too old to start. I just have to have a commitment and a vision, and I can move forward to the point where I now have like 200,000 people on my mail list. And I set that goal 4 years ago. I want 250,000 people on my mail list. And my initial thoughts were, there's no way you can do that. It's not possible. And, within 6 months, I should be there. So yes, it's all about and my whole thing was, I need to contribute this to the world. This is what I can contribute. I can hold a safe space for people. And, this is my vision of bringing something to the world that can change world consciousness. And so I've got to get beyond these thinking patterns and create new ones, or it's never going to happen. I was motivated to stay with it and stay with it and stay with it. So, that's the major thing in terms of what made a difference in my life.
Awesome. So lastly, what does living your best life, or what I call a legendary life, mean to you?
Me, living a legendary life is being committed to continuing to expand and grow until the day you die. And really looking at, like when I was a kid, my vision of when I was 69 years old or 70 years old would be, I'd be retired watching TV all day, maybe taking a trip here and there. And now I say, there's no way I'd want a life like that. And so it's really about, I shifted my vision of who I'm being is that I can contribute and grow to other people, to the planet, to the universe, as long as I'm taking a breath. And to me, that's a legendary life. And everybody has a different pathway. Everybody has their own light to shine. Everybody's gone through their own, struggles and, their own path where they've got their own, themselves to contribute to the world. So it's a different path for everybody. Everybody's got their own purpose, but it's like, to me, that's a legendary life. Finding your purpose, finding your light, shining it out into the world every day, till you aren't breathing anymore.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. Certainly, I think we've opened up people's eyes to the possibilities that are available for them all, if they can kind of like address what has happened in the past, realize that they are the creators of their own reality. And if they do the work, they can create a completely different kind of reality. And then obviously there are different pathways, and then NeuroDynamic Breathwork and other forms of breathwork is certainly a pathway to kind of like really uncovering what is this higher consciousness or inner self, or whatever you want to call it. It does exist. There is something there that can kind of help you understand what it is you are here to do. So for anyone interested in learning more about the work you do, how can they find you online?
I offer a free breathwork session to everyone. And all they have to do is come to my website, which is breathworkonline.com. And if you just go to /free, FREE, it'll take you through a process where you can participate in a workshop for free. It's online. You can do it from your bed. You can just be sitting up in a chair. You can have your video on or off, so you can be totally private if you like. And we have 5 live sessions facilitated every week, so you could just choose one that works for you in your schedule.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking part in the Legend Life Summit.
Well, thank you for having me, Damien. It's been a pleasure.